Throughout the past years, a lot of young people have fought to achieve all the rights and freedoms that we get to enjoy today in the 20th century. I would like to compare two different groups of revolutionary generations of young adults that have a lot of things in common, even though they fought decades apart. I would like to introduce the Flappers and the Hippies. The two movements concerning the Flappers of the early 20s and the Hippies of the 60s both brought important changes for decades to come. Here we will examine a few main factors that reveal their similarities in the way they influenced their generations. First, both of these social groups belonged to post-war generations. Second, both groups consisted of bright young rebels who rejected cultural norms and embodied a fresh youth culture. Third, they wanted to have more freedom in society to do what they wanted to do. Finally, both groups had a very particular appearance and were easy to identify. The Flappers began to appear in the 1920s after World War I. They were a group of young women who were tired of all the repressions that society had toward women. They became an important group of revolutionaries because they changed the way society defined women. They fought for independence from the way that the majority of society expected women to be and behave. They wanted equal rights and acceptance on behalf of both men and women. Flappers were women that started to break the rules of society for the first time, and in doing so, they took the first step for women of the future to lead more independent lifestyles and experience a greater degree of acceptance in all aspects of society. These young women that were born in this decade did not hold themselves back from enjoying their lives. They did not prohibit themselves from doing what they wanted to do. They started to go to sports games, nightclubs, and other places where women were not accepted before. Flappers were young working women who fell in love with jazz music and frequently went to the jazz club after work or perhaps after school. They started to dance in a more provocative way with their male partners. They drank alcohol and smoked cigarettes in public. The Flappers wanted to make their own decisions and felt that one good way to do it was changing their physical appearance. They did not have the time nor the desire to be held back by the highly restrictive corsets worn by their mothers and grandmothers. These new women wore makeup, particularly with bright red lipstick, and to top it off, they cut their hair short. They started to wear dropped waist dresses, shorter skirts, cloche hats, long beaded necklaces, high heels, raccoon coats, and transparent hosiery. They enjoyed showing their skin and feeling sexy. They dated men without discretion instead of settling down and raising a family. The flapper movement eventually reached an end in 1929 when the stock market crashed. Almost overnight, the arrival of the Great Depression in the USA brought a serious tone to society. Flappers stopped partying, but the freedoms women tasted in that era weren't easy to give up. They went back to settle down, get married, and work hard for little pay, but dresses and skirts stayed above the ankle, and the corset stayed forever in the closet. The hippie movement took place in the 1960s and 1970s, reaching its peak in the late 60s. After two world wars, a Great Depression, and a new war in Vietnam in just 50 years, young people started to look for a change, and the hippie movement sprang to life. Like the Flappers years before, young people sought to break away from the values society placed upon them. The poet Allen Ginsberg could possibly be considered the father of this movement. Using the written word, he began to express his frustration, protesting what he saw wrong with the world. Art and music, some of the primary ways that hippies expressed their hunger for peace in society. The movement started small and grew fast because of two major reasons. Many young people were sent to fight in Vietnam, and the music of the era incited an exciting sense of urgency and revolution. The war was considered unjust within the movement, and peace became the main goal for this group of social rebels. Hippies created their own culture within society. It was common for them to run away from their homes and live in communes with other hippies. They were big into practicing environmentally friendly traditions. They were often vegetarian, and hippies practiced free love and sexual liberation, especially for women. They participated in different alternative arts and listened to folk music and psychedelic rock as part of their lifestyle. Hippies were characterized by using psychedelic drugs such as LSD and marijuana because they believed that these drugs helped them to explore an alternative state of mind and expand their consciousness. They did not agree with mainstream politics or violence. They promoted a gentle ideology that focused on peace, love, and personal freedom. The peace symbol eventually came to represent the hippies, and the Volkswagen bus became their unofficial form of transportation, which they frequently painted with colorful graphics. Hippies had an adventurous spirit, and they liked to travel where there was action. They would hitchhike to get to major events, such as the infamous 1969 Woodstock Festival. Like the flappers, hippies had a very distinctive appearance. Clothes were a major part of who they were. Hippies often dressed in brightly colored, ragged clothes, tie-dyed t-shirts, beads, sandals, and sometimes went barefoot. Hippie men would commonly wear their hair long and had beards and mustaches, styles that were considered counter to the typically clean-shaven man of the day. Women, on the other hand, wore little to no makeup and often went braless. They typically purchased their clothes at flea markets or second-hand stores. This movement had a big impact on society. Their culture influenced popular music, film, television, literature, and the arts. Furthermore, in subsequent years, unmarried couples could no longer feel persecuted for living together, and they helped to make religious and cultural diversity gain greater acceptance. The hippie movement's main incentive was to promote peace and to stop the war in Vietnam, and it reached an end around the middle of the 1970s when the war in Vietnam ended. Some historians believe that another reason why the hippie movement started to dissolve was because of the Manson murders. The movement was never the same after Manson and his so-called family gained notoriety after the Tate murders. The hippies couldn't believe that someone who was supposedly like them, with his long hair and love for music, could ever do such a thing.